Message from 020 received at 11:45 hours.
Alex, this is Ben Chamberlain calling from the Corner Shop PR. I wonder if you could give me a call back on either 0207. Thank you.
It's not very often the headmaster gives you a bollocking about how you speak to their staff. Hello, my name is Alex Belfield, the Managing Director, Chief Executive and Head of Knobgags at CelebrityRadio.biz. We just happen to be the #1 reviewer of theatre in the UK and Las Vegas at the moment. If you put in almost any show, our video almost always comes up #1 in video on page 1 of Google, which you would think would give you clout, bearing in mind that Google is the biggest search engine in the world. People don't newspaper, people don't TV nor radio, they Google. So you would think producers and PRs would want to be on side. But what I've noticed in recent months is that I have become the enemy. Why, I asked? Well, it all started about a year ago with Bill Kenwright. You see, he has a PR called Emma Holland, and she wanted me to interview the star Cara of Scylla. And I went to see the show and put up a review of the show, which I was asked to take down. Emma called me and said that Bill Kenwright doesn't allow reviewers from national media. Therefore, would I take down the review? I, of course, laughed when she said this because the notion of local, regional, national or international died out about 10 years ago with a thing called the internet. I mean, even local newspapers go online and therefore are global in the same way I am. So it's utter ill-conceived bollocks to ask me not to review something when you're letting local media, although I understand the agenda why Bill is happy for a local paper to review his show and not somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. I, of course, responded, no, I'm a reviewer. It is my job to review, and therefore I won't be taking it down. She was furious. We were at sort of an impasse. A couple of months later, Saturday Night Fever opened in Wimbledon, and I asked for a ticket, no reply. So I bought a ticket for first night, which happened to be press night, which was a total disaster. The cast were underprepared. Bill had gone to the football on the Saturday, given them the bank holiday Monday off, and I wrote a 2-star review. Fortunately for me, there were 11 other journalists that day that were also in for press night, and they gave it scathing reviews also. This resulted in Bill Kenwright claiming copyright on my video review and having it pulled off YouTube. I wrote to Emma and explained that they had no right to do that. I'm a journalist, and as much as she's entitled to ask me not to review, I'm entitled to review it. That is the game. You put on a show, I buy a ticket, I also buy an opinion. I had no reply. So I re-uploaded the video, and once again Bill Kenwright pulled it, trying to silence my #1 review, which, by the way, if you Google Saturday Night Fever UK Tour review, it comes up 1, 2 and 3 on page 1 of Google still. This resulted in them pulling my second review, and I ended up taking legal action against Bill Kenwright, which cost them thousands through legal fees. This has been a theme over the last year, and I'm curious why. Why do they no longer want reviews for shows? Is it because the shows are crap, or is it because there's been a change in the wind of PR? I remember Max Clifford telling me about Simon Cowell, that his job was 99% protection, 1% promotion. And that seems to be what's happening with theatre. They'd rather people like me not go in with 25 years experience and call them out on when they're cheating their audience. For example, Dr. Dolittle. We asked for a ticket for that. They said no, so we paid for first night. 20 minutes after the show should have started, the producer came out and explained the show wasn't ready, and if it went wrong, we should bear with them because they've been working hard for 5 weeks. That's not acceptable at £55 a ticket. So we move forward to 2019, and there seems to be a trend that I am the enemy and that PRs don't want to offer tickets. Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, for example. Corner Shop PR sent me 3 different press releases about this show, and I asked 3 times to review it, and they ignored all 3 requests. I then wrote to Bradford Alhambra, asked them if I could review it there, and they said that their allocation was full, despite there being hundreds of empty seats. So we paid, and we went down to see it opening week. But curiously, on their press performance, and it was a media night, there were no reviews other than the local paper. Now, you have to remember about local papers, these people are advertisers. It's therefore a deal that they give a good review in return for advertising the show, and vice versa via the theatre. So they're not credible as far as I'm concerned. Where have the proper reviewers gone, and where are their authentic opinions? I know people like Mark Shenton spend more time on social media telling everybody how they're unable to get out of bed and they're mentally ill. I wonder if this is the reason why they don't want these type of people in shows, because they appear to be unstable. I don't think I'm unstable. I think I'm just incredibly honest. And that brings us to our review of PRs. So we've already established Emma Holland is a coward. She didn't reply to a single one of my emails or legal letters. She just buried her head in the sand. We move on to Neil Redding PR, who runs shows like We Will Rock You and PRs people like Ben Elton. Also doesn't reply to emails until you call him out. For example, I went to the producer of Only Fools and Horses and asked why I hadn't had a reply, and the producer told me that they'd be delighted to offer me tickets. Neil Redding, on the other hand, replied, "We just don't want to work with you." Curious. I wonder why. We look at Premier PR, probably one of the biggest PRs other than Corner Shop, which we'll get to at the moment. And Janine there is probably the least helpful PR I've ever encountered. She only ever says no. It's really interesting that she gets frustrated when you don't do it by her terms. But then again, this is a lady who gives every single scoop to Baz in the Daily Mail. And by the way, a curious choice, because it goes in the paper, okay, but who reads papers anymore? I don't see any of his stuff coming up online. If you follow him on Twitter, and that's preaching to the choir because it's only industry, you might see it there. But in terms of Google search, I've never ever seen anything by Baz ever come up on page 1 of Google, ever. So again, these people seem to be living in 1985 when people read newspapers. The Sun newspaper have to give away their newspapers in service stations now to maintain their position as the most read newspaper. It's laughable. As we know, BBC Local Radio have their lowest audience in history, yet they set up whole PR days for musical stars to talk to presenters who have no listeners. These are mostly in the afternoon when they have even fewer listeners than at breakfast. Why would they do this? It's interesting to me. But of course, BBC Local Radio are never going to challenge them. They're just going to do nice interviews, aren't they? They're not all bad. There's some fabulous PRs. Amanda Malpass tries her absolute best to help you wherever she can with her team. Ginny and Alex, who work incredibly hard to set stuff up. There's Lisa Davis PR, who is fabulous. Terry Doherty, worked with her for 20 years. Simon Raw tries his best, but it seems like his hands are tied too. The days of working with journalists seems to be gone. So we fast forward to this week, and Joe Allen PR, who very kindly allowed me to go and review Wicked at the Apollo. But I've Googled this show since, and there are no reviews other than mine. It was a press night, a media night, yet no press were invited. So what's going on? This is very interesting to me. So we've got Priscilla, no reviews. Then you ask for interviews with people like Shane Ritchie, and I'm told no, he's not doing any interviews. Yet you look at his grids for The Entertainer, and they're the most shocking I've ever seen. Simon Raw is looking after curtains. I wanted to see it in Bromley. He couldn't do that. Asked me to go to Manchester. Well, I'm not going to go to Manchester when I'm in Bromley, so I said I'd see it there. You look at the grids, it's empty. Also, it seems like Jason isn't doing any interviews. They're on a ridiculous guarantee at some theatres, so maybe they don't care. These stars are getting paid and the producers are getting paid. It's very interesting that the whole game just seems to have shifted. This week, though, was very interesting because I had this call from Ben Chamberlain at Corner Shop PR. I tried in the last 2 weeks to see 2 of his shows. Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, didn't reply to 3 of my emails. And this week, Thursford, they're also the PR for their Christmas Spectacular. Again, I emailed 3 times with no reply. So I sent a really shitty email, and I was happy to do so. Here's the thing, right? I'm actually on your side. I'm trying to publicise your shows in return for a hit on my YouTube channel. We've had 57 million. We're doing okay. We come up number 1 currently because the algorithms prove that people watch my stuff more than anybody else doing it. That's why I'm number 1. The second anyone has more viewed minutes than me, they will go to number 1 and I'll become number 2, and that will continue until I'm non-existent. But right now, why wouldn't you want to have that exposure? I've never heard a bad word about Thursford Christmas, and I gave a 5-star review to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I bought a ticket. We are lucky that we have a budget to be able to buy a ticket for every show, and that's down to our success on YouTube. Ironically, we're 4 times bigger on YouTube than what's on stage. When will people realise that Facebook doesn't give you accurate stats? Scroll past counts as a view, even if it's muted and people don't watch it. Ugh. Listen, I'm not going away, and I don't think journalists should, and it's interesting to me the manipulations of people like Janine at Premier PR, who are looking after Les Miserables, the concert. There was an interesting deal done with the devil there, that you could have a ticket in the media providing you didn't review it. So once again, I'm the only person, credible reviewer, who's actually reviewed it. I wonder whether they didn't want anybody to mention the fact that Michael Ball doesn't sing it in the key in which Stars was written. For example, a credible reviewer will notice this thing. I notice the sycophants who want free tickets often just say everything's wonderful. Well, that's not the real world, and that's not helpful. My defence is that if I say everything's wonderful, it doesn't help the great people, and it sells tickets for crap shows. My job is to celebrate greatness and to expose when producers are being sneaky. Again this week, there was press night in Manchester for Colleen Nolan's show. The Thunder Girls, I can't find a single review anywhere. There were no press invited. So here's my position before we get on to Corner Shop PR and Ben Chamberlain's call, the most sanctimonious, arrogant and supercilious man I've ever spoken to in my life, who was absolutely not willing to accept that not replying to emails after you send a press release is acceptable. And this is a culture with these millennials who are working in these offices that they think they can just respond as and when they're ready. Well, in the real world, that's not really acceptable. I noticed that most reviewers keep their heads down. I noticed that they don't want to expose what's going on in touring theatre and in the West End because they just want free tickets. This is curious to me. When did this become a thing? Why aren't the stage calling people out anymore for cheating audiences? I tried to make a fuss about Peter Andre being the big face on the poster for 8 months of Grease the Musical. And then it turns out in his opening 4 weeks, he only did 18 performances. Less than half the performances at Leeds Grand were done by Peter Andre, even though for months and months and months he was the only face on the poster. They ended up bringing in Ori Doobie Doobie to understudy, first cover, or share the role, as they later defended. It's cheating. Nobody says anything. It's a 3-minute role also. Who made a point of mentioning that? Same thing with the Palladium. Jason Donovan, rave reviews, but he was only in it 3 minutes. So there's a lot going on in theatre right now, and I thought I'd make this little vlog just to expose how I feel as a journalist trying to operate amidst this tsunami of shitheads who simply can't bear it when you say, my job is a reviewer and I'm going to review. So to Ben Chamberlain, who gave me the most insulting call of my career, and by the way, calling a guy who's done phone-ins for 15 years as a shock jock is a pretty stupid move. When I asked him 6 times, what would you do if someone didn't reply to 3 of your emails? He said, I'd keep emailing. You really are a moron. Apparently he was very offended that I called his team dickheads. I take it back. They are not dickheads. They're actually And here's why. If you send a press release to someone, or if you're paid thousands of pounds a month to represent a show, the least you can do is reply and say yes please or no thank you. Ignoring is not an option. And in my case, a note to all PRs. I am coming to see your show. I'd like to work with you. If you don't want to, I will buy a ticket first preview. And I'm not paying to come on press night where no press are invited. So why don't we work together? This impasse is ridiculous. I don't know who came up with this cockamamie scheme, but it seems like a very interesting millennial way of operating. You will do as you're told and you will behave because you want free tickets. Darlings, I can afford to buy a ticket and I will. And I have. That's why Les Mis the concert only got a 3-star review. That's why I'm prepared to call out Waitress, who's never stood on a stage in his life, the defence being he auditioned for the part. How many auditions in the West End do you know where you're allowed to take in a selfie camera and upload it to YouTube before it's decided if you've got the role? This is a setup, this is PR, this is very clever, but you can't fool me. Let's work together and do even more PR bollocks. You can use my platform, the #1 guy on Google. We all have our price. You waste all this money on marketing. If you know you've got a shit show, hire me to put up all your video content before anywhere else, and piff paff poof, there it will be on page 1 of Google. It'll go to #1, it'll stay at #1 forever, unlike somebody's Twitter or in papers that are thrown in the bin. That's smart, right? But phoning me, of all people, and trying to outwit me on the phone with your big bully boy tactics, put your little willy back in your trousers and start using your brains, because I'm going nowhere, love. You might think you're the big man. You might wear a flashy suit and sunglasses indoors, but you don't scare me. I couldn't give 2 fucks who you are. If I write to you politely 3 times, you and your team, and ask to review a show and you can't be asked to reply, don't phone me offended when I call you a It's 2019. You might want to claim your mental health is important and you're a victim. Well, listen, I'm going to claim that you're affecting my mental health and I'm a victim too. Stop it. This is ridiculous. This is West End, not brain surgery. I guarantee no one will be willing to put their head above the parapet to like or share this openly, but isn't it interesting when I uploaded a video about Waitress and Joe Sugg a few weeks ago, I had private calls from all over this country from people who were applauding my honesty, but wouldn't publicly admit it. That's where we're at in 2019. Here's my message to every PR in Britain and Broadway and Las Vegas. If you put on a show, I am entitled to review it. That is the rule. You put something out and I put my opinion out. Doesn't mean I'm right, but to think I will not go just because you won't give me a ticket is not going to work. How many more times? Ignoring my emails is a fool's errand. I will call you a because you are. It's not acceptable. It's rude. And I know my colleagues have to tolerate it. Across the country, I speak to friends across BBC Local Radio. Neil Redding are the worst. They never, ever, ever reply to emails. They're appalling. They don't care. And if only their clients knew. Well, this is the first video where I'm just setting out my stall. The next video will be where I continue to name names and out those who are not doing their jobs and are up to shenanigans. You might have your cockamamie schemes, so have I. You've been listening to another vlog by me, Alex Belfield, here at celebrityradio.biz, where last year we had over 12 million minutes viewed on YouTube. We're now the #1 reviewer for theatre in the UK and Las Vegas, and there's nothing you can do about it. Ta-da.